first of all, I mean, I loved your film, Giants Rising, which tells the epic tale of the majestic redwood trees, the tallest and some of the oldest beings on Earth. And just quickly, I wanted to, like, what I enjoyed most about the film is that it captured the magic and the humanity of the redwoods, which was awesome. And I really enjoyed that part, and especially their connection with the Yurok people. I think that was like what really drew me in personally. I think you did an amazing job with it. You brought a magical element and like also the practicality of what the trees bring to the ecosystem. So I just wanted to say that off the bat.
Thanks.
And yeah, so I'll give you a chance. Maybe you can introduce yourself to my audience and just share a little bit about what drew you into documentary filmmaking and maybe this film specifically.
Sure. So my background is I have been making documentaries for like 25 years. Straight out of college, I started doing this. I thought I wanted to be a writer for National Geographic and instead wound up with a job in their television department. And the rest is history. So I spent a lot of time in network, like at places like National Geographic. I was at PBS. And I've also been on staff at places like the American Museum of Natural History. So I also do storytelling, multimedia storytelling in immersive spaces. So I kind of go back and forth generally between television, or what we used to call television, I should say filmmaking, and then also the experiential stuff. And I also make a lot of films and experiences for like park visitor centers and other places. And I love going back and forth between those two things. I think there's so many different ways to tell a story. And every time you tell it slightly differently in a different format, you capture a new part of the audience, which is really exciting and fun. So this project, so I don't usually do independent feature films. I had done one before, like 15 years ago, about the relationship between people and their dogs. This particular story was something that I think was brewing in my brain since I was like a 12-year-old kid. I'm from New York. I came to visit the Bay Area. I went to Muir Woods on a family trip, and I was just floored by the redwoods. It was like, I was a kid who was into like fantasy and science fiction and Lord of the Rings. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is Middle Earth. This is real. I just was so awestruck. And I think in a lot of ways, it's what kind of led me to become someone who tells stories, documentaries, museum exhibits about the natural world. I was so curious and so engaged. And then, over the years, I've actually throughout my career, I have made short pieces about redwoods and climate change. I did stories about activism around redwoods. There's a woman, Julia Butterfly Hill, who sat in the top of a redwood tree for 2 years to make sure it wasn't cut down. That's in our film.
Saw that.
I actually went up and interviewed her. That was in 1998.
Oh, wow.
And, I got to the top of that tree and I was like, whoa, I knew that the trees had moved me. I mean, I even left my native New York and now make my home in a small redwood grove in Northern California, but it moved her and so many other people in ways that, sort of led them to sacrifice their everything, to risk all to protect these trees. And I was like, well, what is going on with these trees? And I really felt like, and that was a while ago, but as the years wore on, I felt like, we're telling these bits and pieces about these stories, but we're not looking at it in its totality. We're not telling that big epic tale of the redwoods and looking at it from all of these different angles and the way that there's so many different ways that we as humans connect to these trees. They bring to us, the story of our relationship with the trees. And I think I also decided to do this film, and I did think it was going to be for network first. But, often when you do films for networks, it's like, well, is it natural history? All natural history, no people? Or is it like, all people and about activism or about the indigenous tribe? And I was like, yeah, it's about everything.
Right.
And so in the end, I was like, I think I just have to make this film on my own. And they did. And I created a trailer in 2018, shopped it around for a while, and started applying for grants because I had gotten nonprofit status.
Right.
Then COVID hit. I wasn't hearing much, and then COVID hit, and then Foundation found their way to me, and here we are.
Wow, that's amazing. I think some of the things you said that struck me is so many facets that create the whole story, and I think that's my personal experience with the film was it touched me because it was like a story that drew in communities, it drew in the science of the trees, and it drew in kind of like a story, like you said, like this is Middle Earth, like this is and I think at least me, I'm very much not an expert, I'm novice when it comes to trees and the science of that, but I feel like there was an education that took place for me, being like someone that knows nothing about it, because of the human element and the storytelling element that you put to the film. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Like, how did you approach conveying the trees as like special sentient beings with their own community? Because I think people kind of hear that and on a surface level, and almost it goes in one ear and out the other ear. But when you watch a film like this, it really makes it resonate. How did you approach that?
Well, I think, as I started learning about the science of the trees myself and like really going deeper, you realize how these trees themselves are this incredible interconnected community, right? Redwoods in particular. 200 plus trunks can all be a single organism, all sharing resources and communicating underground. And so when you hear that, you're like, oh, wow. This is, it brings we know that trees are living things, are living beings, but we think of them sometimes like mountains but they're not, right? And so through the science, I could remind people of that. And then also there is a sort of very natural kind of metaphor and connection to how we as communities work together to survive, really. And how we are both sort of programmed that way, both the trees and us as humans. And it's in our interactions that we really both have the best chance of thriving if we manage those in the right way. And so I feel like the story really lent itself to weaving those different stories together.
Right.
And, there were a lot of stories in there. And in truth, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm putting way too much in here. And some stories didn't make it in, but I really felt like I wanted anyone who watched the film to find a point of connection. And I wanted to give people enough science to really get that these trees, like how interconnected they are, like to the salmon, to the fog, to the, and at the same time realize kind of what's at stake in terms of if we, don't think about, we've done so much to these forests. That's, for the most part in the past, but what can we do now to restore these gifts, right? And it's about redwoods, but really it's about old growth forests everywhere. And it's about trees everywhere. Like we all, I've yet to meet a person who doesn't have a tree or a forest that had some significance to them in their life, right? All like had a connection with a tree where we've been like, oh yeah, maybe we climbed it as a kid or whatever it is. You just have those moments where you kind of feel it. And I kind of wanted to make that okay. Like just acknowledge that. Like you don't have to be a tree hugger to feel that. This is our shared humanity across cultures, across everything. We feel this. And so what I love about redwoods is I always say they're a bit of a gateway drug to appreciation for nature. Because they do strike so much awe because their height and their age, but it just kind of opens you up to receiving that kind of magic of nature from other places, from your backyard.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that definitely resonated with me. In the beginning of the film, I think somebody says like get certain health benefits or some psychological benefits from just being around the trees, also from just looking at the trees, he said, like the images.
Yeah.
So there's a real sense of wanting to protect the trees by the end of the film that I felt. I think somebody even says that at the end of the film, like, we protect the trees, we protect us, in so many words. I guess I'm maybe jumping to, I write a lot about ethics and corporations and the balance of, like, and the effect that corporations have on people and nature. So much of my work explores, like, the ethical responsibilities of businesses. So I guess, what do you hope maybe Giants Rising conveys about our ethical obligations to protect natural wonders like the trees, like the redwood trees? What do you hope Giants Rising can convey in that aspect?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. So a few different things, with redwoods in particular, but so many of our natural spaces, there's a lot protected in parks, right? We have amazing park systems with state parks and national parks, but their funding is not a sure thing. And as there's changes in the climate, and also as these parks, sometimes they're sort of fragments. There are these like islands, right?
Yeah.
And without being interconnected to that greater ecosystem, that greater community, they just are more vulnerable to all of this. And so we created this situation. We know how much we rely on these forests to capture carbon and clean our air and do all of these other things, never mind those just gifts to our well-being. And yes, it's true, just being in these woods, like, we soak up these organic compounds that do all sorts of good things to us. And we feel it. Like, we know when we walk in the woods that we feel better, but they can quantify it. They've been studying quantifying it. All of these things. So I think from a sort of ethical perspective, that if you have the means to help make sure, one, that the parks stay intact, that they have the support that they need, and that we find ways to enable our parks to grow, to reconnect these kind of islands and fragmented, because sometimes there's just like a big plot of like commercial land in the middle where maybe they're thinking of building new housing development, where it could create this incredible corridor for reconnecting these sort of fragments of forest ecosystems that would, give so much. So I think it's just about, thinking more strategically about how we maintain and restore forests, and making sure that there's funding in place to do that, because there often isn't.
Right. And the opportunities we have, like, on a personal level, and opportunities we have in things that are related in terms of voting, in terms of, like, where we put our dollar, things like that. I guess everyone can have do their part or do what they can. And then I think it's interesting to think about how corporations can make even a bigger impact in terms of, like, the projects that they put into play that's going to affect those natural environments. So another question I wanted to ask too was about the Yurok people perspectives and their connection to the redwoods. It was, I think, like I said at the top, that was one of my favorite parts of the film is their connection to the redwoods. How did the collaboration with that community come about, and what impact did their perspectives have on your storytelling process?
Oh yeah. So when I started the film, I thought, okay, it's going to be science, and I'm going to have the artist story, and I'm going to weave those two together. And then sort of the larger story of, how our relationship with the redwoods has been. And I didn't know about the Yurok tribe. I obviously knew that there were indigenous tribes that had made their home for millennia within these redwood forests, but I really didn't know anyone from those tribes, didn't know much about them. The Yurok tribe is one of the few tribes that's really intact, in a way that down where I am, which is the Bay Area, the indigenous communities are not. So they've really been able to maintain a lot of their culture despite what they've been through. And I was talking to one of the people who work at Redwood National State Parks, and they were telling me how they were starting to work with this particular tribe. And they're like, yeah, you should talk to them. I was like, yeah, I should definitely talk to them.
Sure, yeah.
I got on the phone with someone from the Yurok tribe, and they said, hey, we're carving a canoe next week. Do you want to film it? I was like, yes.
Absolutely.
So I grabbed my
Yeah.
crew, whoever was around, and we went up and we filmed that scene with the canoe carver. But while we were up there, I also got to speak with the salmon biologist, with the woman who's, in charge of preservation. And I went, oh, this is a really big story. This is a beautiful story. And this is, clearly a story that needs to be part of the film. And this is the documentary, dilemma. One story continuously leads to the next, to the next.
Oh, interesting.
I interviewed, 4 people from the Yurok tribe, and I was like, it's too many. I'm just going to include one. I couldn't. Each part of the story that they represented, I realized was really key, and together painted this portrait of how the community is connected to the redwoods in a way that the rest of us are not, mostly, for the most part. There are other indigenous tribes in the northern area and throughout the range as well, who bring this kind of insight and wisdom and connection to the redwoods. And I think that what I saw as I was talking to them was an opportunity to really highlight that as a way for us to get these forests back in shape, right?
Yeah.
And during the time when I was making the film, actually what was happening is that the parks were collaborating with the tribes, with the NGOs like Save the Redwoods League, and figuring out how to come together to grow back 70,000 acres of massive redwoods. And they're off, and they're doing it, and they've ceded some of the land. The national park has ceded some of the land back to the Yurok tribe for a new entrance to Redwood National Park. That's unprecedented. It's just really making sure that they have a seat at the table, because it's in all of our benefits, to have, that kind of representation. So it was, as soon as that piece of the story emerged, it was like, oh, well, we're doing this.
I have a couple follow-ups on that. Very interesting. I think for me, the heartbeat of the story was all the people, mainly the Yurok tribe, as I've said, but I thought that made for a beautiful payoff too, because of how the Yurok tribe specifically was able to work to rebuild like their land. And then also the payoff with the artist as the story progressed. So that was beautiful at the end. I was really moved by that. So my other question is, like, maybe in documentaries in general, is there is that part of it where it's like, okay, you see all these different stories, but also is there like almost like a fear or a nervousness about, okay, where's this going to go if maybe the story isn't developing yet? You have this topic, but jumping in and just kind of seeing where these conversations and these conversations with these different invested people take you. Is that like a trepidation that you have, or is that just part of the job?
Both. It is a trepidation and it is part of the job. You have to hope that the story arc pays off, and you don't know. So when I first met Sarah Bird in like 2018, the artist, photographer, she had this idea to, create a 320-foot portrait of a redwood tree and bring it into a city. And I was like, this is so cool. This is great. And so I was tracking her for 5 years, and she hadn't done it. And I was like, there were hurdles. There were hurdles in her own life. It was very costly figuring out how to do it, all of these things. And I went, oh my God, I'm not going to have this payoff. Do I take her out? Wait, I don't know. I mean, it just, all of those things happen. And in truth, what happened is I finished the film without what you saw, the ending of her actually successfully bringing it. I finished the film. I premiered it in February of 2024 in Santa Barbara, hoping that Sarah was actually going to get it together. And sure enough, I got a call basically in March and was like, she'd connected with some other artists in the Bay Area, and we do kind of this kind of outdoor experience work. And she was like, we're doing it. I was like, all right, getting the crew together. And so we did it. We recut the film. And now I feel like, phew, we have payoff on that story.
Amazing.
But it's always the case. I mean, it's very rare that you know which way it's going to go, you know, and you know that however it goes, you're going to have to find the finality in it. But some payoffs are stronger than others. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I think, so your film is going to be shown, I'll be attending the Coronado Film Festival. I know it's going to be showing there. It's been showing at other film festivals. Could you share maybe where my listeners, my followers could eventually be able to watch the film themselves? If it's going to be online or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're still figuring out distribution, but we should know pretty soon. So the best thing to do is go to giantsrising.com.
Okay.
We'll have updates there. It'll be on the website. You can sign up for the newsletter, but it'll be on the website as soon as it's available. We're also still doing more screenings, and that's all on the website. And yeah, we are. We should have some news on that front soon, where people can see it in their own homes. But I do have to say, having tagged along on this tour, this world tour that the Redwoods are doing through this film, it is really wonderful to see it in an immersive environment, in community. It sort of kind of reinforces what all the messages of the film, like, come see it together. And sometimes I show up, like I will be there for the Coronado Film Festival.
Oh, great.
It's the scientists, sometimes it's members from the Yurok tribe, or Sarah Bird, the artist. We try to come and talk to people, because that's where it's going to make it a more memorable experience. And also, literally sitting in that theater watching this film does good things to your emotional, mental, and physiological state. It does. That's what these scientists tell us. So, like, come and bask in the redwoods. They're hard to get to, so we're bringing the redwoods to you. You know.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there. I did watch it here. I think I'm excited about watching with the community and with you. So again, I think that's we can end it here. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and for creating this amazing film. And yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time, and I'm glad it resonated with you.